So I want to shout out to the rest of the folks on the team, Sarah Tai, Brian Kelly, Nathan Ellingwood, who's here somewhere wandering around, and then Siefert Rajamonikam. So the motivation here is Kokkos is open source, so since large language models have downloaded the entire internet, right, like Kokkos should be in there. And that's actually more or less true. There's exceptions, so like Apple's Open Elm, no Kokkos. So they're there, but can they help us write better Kokkos code? So first thing we need to do is a way of measuring that sort of thing. And so what we had is courtesy of the Kokkos kernels team and friends, we have a human-generated Q&A data set of, Kokkos questions and then code to answer it. And we're going to use text-based metrics on that. Compilation-based metrics would be probably good as well. There's complications of that, and I'll show you that on the next slide. We don't have those, but it's something we like to work towards. And then we're doing more than off-the-shelf evaluation, and I'll get into more of that in a minute. So here's an example. This is Sandia AI chat, which is OpenAI. I say, hey, create a Kokkos view of doubles of size 10 by 3. Let's see, what does it tell me? To create a Kokkos view of doubles of size 10 by 3, you can use the following code snippet in C++. This assumes you've already included the necessary Kokkos headers and initialized Kokkos in your application. Liar. Because it immediately gives me the Kokkos headers, a main function, initializes Kokkos, gives me the one line I asked for. Now, granted, my question was not well specified. I did not specify, say, the memory space this is going to leave in, so it used the default, which was cool. I didn't give it a name or a label, but it made stuff up. Now, when it's done with the one line I asked for, it gives me a fill routine, a print routine, finalizes Kokkos, and then talks a bit about what it thinks about Kokkos and how it works. Yeah, and this is the problem. These models are chatty, they're very talkative, and they generate an exceptional amount of fluff. You can say, well, why don't you just ask a better question? And that works kind of sometimes and not reliably. And the smaller the model is, the harder it is to prompt engineer, and the same tricks don't always work. And this is the problem with a compilation-based metric. If I had some way, like code snippet of testing, if I got that one line right, this would fail completely because it gives me a second main function. I'd be done. And so hence why text-based metrics are the best we can do right now, but we're hoping to improve. So one of the things we've done is evaluations of 80-plus off-the-shelf models. So what we have on the bottom axis is, on the X is the model parameters in billions. That's a log scale. The Y-axis is our sort of text-based metric. Up is good. And you can see that, they're all over the map. Generally, bigger is better, but there's some medium-sized models that do exceptionally well. And if I sort of zoom in on a select bit of some of our best contenders, we're going to see something like this. So our best model with the score of 0.34, remember that number, 0.34, that's Claude all the way on the right. You see a whole herd of llamas in various shades of blue with the darkest blue being like some of the code llamas, the medium blue being the llama 3s, and the lighter blue being llama 4s. You see the folks from Mistral AI in our pinks. And then you see fine-tunes of various models from various Chinese LLM generators. The fine-tunes are substantially better than the base models, as it turns out. But you can say, well, there's some small models, not just because I went to the University of Illinois, but this one right here does exceptionally well at just 6.7 billion parameters versus however large Claude is, or there's your Llama 4 or 5B right next to it. So we're able to evaluate these and say which models work well for Kokkos and which don't. We can also do other stuff. So one of the first things we said is let's look at retrieval augmented generation, right? If you have a database of Kokkos used in code, which we do, you could basically search it for your question and then feed it to the language model and get it summarized. And so we've got a whole herd of llamas over there. You actually see the names on the bottom, and then you get the bar that you would have seen on the previous plot, except for this gray bit at the top. And the gray bit is the boost you get from using RAG. So for some models, it doesn't help. But if you look at the Llama 70B, that boosts it up to a 0.35. It boosts it up to better than something you have to pay for, right? It's a better answer than Claude got. Not by much, but it's better with an only 70 billion size. We've also looked at supervised fine-tuning. That's an added challenge where we got a second data set with one of our vendor partners. And again, you see the same thing. We got a little Mistral in the middle there. But there's two sad cases where that red is actually the fine-tuning hurt. We had Nathan Ellingwood look through the automatically extracted set that our vendor partner had come up with, and there were roughly 30-odd question and answer pairs that didn't actually involve Kokkos at all. So that probably doesn't help us generate better Kokkos. So it's something we're looking at doing better. And when I get to our final slide and talk about sort of areas for collaboration, I'll call that out. And the last one was to try to do some agentic prompt engineering, right? So in this is a very simple example. I said, hey, is this prompt asking for a code snippet, a function, or an entire C++ program? Based on that, rewrite the prompt. Again, for some models, it didn't help, and the improvement on others was sort of minimal. But the sort of humans don't write good prompts for LLMs, and you can take that as the judgment on the human or the LLM as you see fit. Can we use LLMs to write better prompts? That's something that's also kind of interesting and worth exploring. So we've actually are working on deploying some of this at Sandia. We've got 2 internally hosted resources. There's Atlas, which is our sort of internally hosted web chat, and there's Shirty, which is our sort of OpenAI style endpoint. One of the cool things about that is we've got editor integration through Shirty with Vim, Emacs, and VS Code. And then we've also got RAG solutions deployable via both Atlas and hopefully Shirty. And then we've collected our RAG data set of like 44,000 Kokkos using bits from 30 different repositories that we hope to be able to use this to deploy an AI tool for writing better Kokkos code at Sandia. Well, okay, that's great. Most of you aren't in Sandia. And that's why I have this slide. This is a chance, really to think about, is there a better way to do it rather than have a Sandia solution and maybe an Oak Ridge solution and maybe a CEA solution? Is there something we can come together on? So the first up is there's no Hugging Face for RAG, right? There's no central easy place to do RAG. Could we make that easier, both to enable, say, site local deployment? Like, let's say your site doesn't want you sending your queries out. Okay, that's fine, right? Is there a way we can be smarter about that? Or potentially thinking of cloud deployment. The second is, can we develop metrics, better metrics? This is better ways of measuring or better data sets. I put non-public there because if it becomes a public data set, it will be in the next generation of training data. Your score will increase. And maybe not because the code's any better, maybe because it's memorizing the right answer. Fine-tuning, we had mixed results at that, but this would be something that we'd love to talk more with the greater community. Best practices, best data sets. This third one, improved Q&A extraction for instruct tuning, right? Given code repositories using Kokkos, how do we get better question and answer pairs we can use for the training? Synthetic code and tests for future training. So when Meta trained the Llama 3 models, they decided there was not enough code on the internet. So they generated synthetic unit tests and then had the previous Llama models go monkeys at a keyboard to generate code that would satisfy those unit tests as a way of generating synthetic code. To have better training, and then potentially the release of a shared model, right? If there is something that as a community we could put together that would be a Kokkos-specific AI, that's something we could think about releasing. And so that's my last question to you. Is this something worth doing together? I don't know, and I'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are slightly over time, but it's not his fault, and we'll take the time for a couple questions because I think there might be people interested here. Yeah, Julia?
I don't know for who this question is, but how much of the questions that are asked on Slack could be answered by a bot who reads the Slack for a little bit of time before?
I've always wanted to have a trot bot.
We don't know, right? That's an interesting question. And it's something I actually asked before, right? I thought that there is probably, my feeling is there's a good chunk of questions which something like this could answer, right? Because we get a lot of like repeat questions, a lot of questions which are relatively basic, right? I mean, we even get like a lot of questions which have nothing really to do with Kokkos, but the fact, that your compiler is not on your path or something like that, right? And I think that could help, right? The problem is you would need to get that integrated up, but maybe that's something we can talk with like Amazon or somebody like that about, right? Yeah. I think Yuichi was first.
So, how complicated your question was, and like, would you like to ask them to fix your internal Kokkos code which was not fixed
So our questions are generally of the form, write a Kokkos thing to do X. They're generally fairly simple, like give me a function, give me a parallel, whatever sorts of questions, right? Again, mostly written by the Kokkos kernels developers. So if you get in their head and you'd be like, oh, these are the sorts of things they'd pick as examples. We do not have any, take this C++ code and rewrite it using Kokkos questions. There's certainly a case for looking at that as an evaluation set as well. But that's not something we're looking at right now.
And there's certainly no implement this backend for Kokkos.
Right, that's right.
And there's just not, or fix this backend, right? I mean, there's just not enough code out there which does that, right? Because, I mean, it's just Kokkos core which does that. Damien?
So the editor plugin Shorty that you mentioned, I don't fully understand. Could it facilitate bringing the prompt to you, or is it a complete, it's doing and it suggests?
So depending on the tool, you can use it as an autocomplete or a, I basically pop open another Emacs buffer. Sorry, VI users, there's a way to do this too. And then I basically type my question in there, and it'll go ping the Shorty server and come back and give me the answer. Those, by the way, those editor integrations are open source. They're not things we wrote. They're sort of available online, and you could try integrating that against the endpoint of your choice if you have one.
So you said you're trying to deploy it internally in Sandia. Is there a particular reason why you can't? Like, I would love to run this when I'm writing code and see what it tells me.
So is there, well, that's something we can talk about, right? Like, how would that be best to deploy something either cloud or at Oak Ridge?
I mean, one of the problems is, right, this is not cheap to run, right? If you have people doing this, right, you need, so depending on how many how many users you have, right, you need.
Right now, I was thinking just giving a few people who want to obtain developers and just see what it says and give you feedback and telling you that's great or.
I mean, right now it feeds in an internal database, right, and it's on restricted network. As it's, I don't think we even have it on the open network.
Correct, although that's something we're hoping to fix.
So this is going to be hard to do, but I think eventually, right, if we actually move stuff like this into the Kokkos, into HBSF or something like that as a community effort, I think we should talk to companies like Amazon and whatnot, to see, is this something which they can have as a choice, right? As like one of the plugin, LLMs you can choose if you are subscribed to Amazon Web Services, AI servers and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
So that's not something we looked at. But that's actually a very good question, right? Like, if it's, one would hope that the data sets we're using don't have a lot of deprecated code in them, but, that's certainly, and especially the open weight models that are trained on like the history of the internet, right? Like the Llama 3 models cut off at December 2023. So there's probably a lot of code that it's firmly convinced is not deprecated, but is.
I mean, also, it sometimes pretends it's firmly convinced that certain things exist which don't actually exist, right?
It's firmly convinced regardless, yes.
Okay, maybe one more question.
So Atlas is our internal sort of web-based front end. The original version was done doing Chainlit. They just redid it, and I forgot what the thing they've done is. It's an internal front end to open weight LLMs off the internet. Think a handful of llamas and stuff like that. That's not specific to Kokkos, but once we have our Kokkos RAG database available, right, you can then say, oh yes, hit the RAG, give me the question, and then get Kokkos specific answers. Likewise, if we have a Kokkos specific model there, you do a little click down box, click the Kokkos model, and go.
Okay, thank you. This was it for today. I hope you all come back tomorrow and have a good time here.